My name is Katrina Scott, and I'm the Academic Director at the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children at Western University. On behalf of the Learning Network and the Knowledge Hub, welcome to our webinar, Storytelling of the Oshkimadizijik Inéwin from the Bush. I want to acknowledge that our work is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Chinongtong nations. These lands are connected with the London Township and Sombra treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. We make this acknowledgement to counter the doctrine of discovery and recognize Indigenous lands and sovereignty. We recognize that many Black people were violently displaced to Canada through settler colonialism and slavery. We will continue to work collaboratively with communities to challenge colonialism, anti-Black racism, and further forms of oppression that remain pervasive in Canada and that result in disproportionate impact of gender-based violence on oppressed communities. We are so happy today to be joined by Dr. Joy Wabi and Alicia Williamson. Dr. Joy Wabi is an associate professor in Indigenous social work at Laurentian University. She works in the community at the grassroots level, focusing on wellness, culture, and bringing people together. Alicia Williamson is an MSW Indigenous Field Study graduate at Wilfrid Laurier. Her grandmother was an artist who worked with quills, birch bark, and many natural materials. Over the past couple of years, Alicia has been working to reclaim these practices. We are first going to begin with a discussion between Joy, Alicia, and then we will move into a question and answer period. Joy and Alicia, I'll pass it over to you to get us started.
Miigwech, Katrina. So Ani Bojo, everyone. Miigwech for the introduction. And yeah, so we're going to talk about some of the work that Joey and I have been doing in our communities. And I'm just going to jump into it since we kind of did a brief introduction. So for this session today, I'm going to delve a little bit more into who I am, and Joey's free to share a little bit more about herself and some of the folks who are a part of our group and helping this work. We're going to talk about the beginning of Youth Voices and where that started and the journey to where we are today, and our current project, which is titled Stories from the Bush, and the work that we're doing to gather and collect stories and work together. And some of the main messages and themes that we've gathered from our experiences and things that we've learned and hope to continue nurturing together. And I have a picture here of Mahnomen. I was at the Mahnomen Kewin gathering in Curve Lake last weekend with some members of our community. And so that's a picture of roasted Mahnomen that's being danced on to remove the chaff off of the outside of the seed. And in Anishinaabeg language, Mahnomen means the good seed. And so I kind of wanted to begin by centering myself and remembering my relationship with Mahnomen that I've developed over this work, and hope that I can pass along a good seed through our stories to you folks all today. So just trying to go to the next slide. Oh, one too far. Sorry, it might be a couple too far. A little slow on my end. Okay, so I'll start with me and then I'll pass it off to Joey. So Ani bizagnog misinibekwe indigenous or wabajong indonjaba Kitchener and Dow. So I'm a member of Wukwamkong unceded territory, although I grew up just outside of community, about 40 minutes away in a Little Current. which is located on Manitoulin Island. And as was mentioned, I'm currently working towards my Master's of Social Work in the Indigenous field of study at Wilfrid Laurier University. So I'm a guest in Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral Peoples Territory. So I like to acknowledge that I am currently situated on the Haldimand Tract, and I'm grateful to be in the territories of Six Nations of the Grand River and Mississaugas of the Credit. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about my relationships with the land and cultural reclamation and my relatives as we work through this presentation, and I'll pass it over to Joey.
Miigwech, Alicia. So yeah, Kwekwe, Ziguan Kwe Nadujnakas, Atikdo Dem, Wolf Lake First Nation, Dunjaba, Algonquin, Anishinaabe, Kwe, and Dow. So I am Algonquin. I am from Wolf Lake First Nation in northwestern Quebec, although I was raised in Toronto and then made my way further up north the older I got, I guess. Yeah, so I do work at Laurentian University. I have three amazing children. Actually, one of them, my oldest, lives in Temiskaming, Quebec, and I seen someone introduce themselves from Quebec. So you are in where my daughter's from, so that's pretty cool. And I see people from Bella Bella and people from Peterborough and Atikameksheng, all over the place. So I think that's wonderful. So Francis Moore says they're from Temiskaming First Nation. Awesome, TFN, awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. I could go into like this whole thing. So I'm connected to 4 First Nations, Long Point, TFN, Wolf Lake, and Kewik. So those are the 4 that I have family in, and probably some other ones, but those are the closest ones. All right, so getting back to my bio. I do teach at Laurentian, been there since 2017. I love working with youth and, just bringing their voices together and what they have to say, because I think sometimes it's not heard or seen as valid or, to be listened to. And I really want I want them to be heard, because they are the next generation coming up. And yeah, I just think it's really important. And yeah, I mentioned I had 3 children. So my daughter is 28. My boys are 19 and 17, and they are wonderful children. So that's how I like to introduce myself. Miigwech.
And so we also have a couple members of our main core group that weren't able to be with us today. So I'll just introduce them in some of their own words. So Project CoLeads, so another youth that's working alongside me. We're cousins. She's also from Wakwamkong and is currently living in Swakmok, so Sudbury territory. We were students together and both graduated in the same class from the Indigenous Social Work program at Laurentian University, which is where our connection to Joey and Michelle both came in, as we found each other in those spaces. And she is currently doing amazing work as an Indigenous social worker with the Rainbow District School Board. And Eugenia enjoys the learning opportunities, like learning about her culture, traditions, Anishinaabe, and also working on her academics. And we also work with Michelle Kennedy. She's a mentor on this project. She's a member of Oneida of the Thames First Nation. She was raised in London, Ontario, and she's Bear Clan. Michelle is a registered teacher with the Ontario College of Teachers and specializes in junior intermediate Native studies. Currently, she's an assistant professor in the Department of Integrated Studies and Education at McGill University. And we're so grateful to have the beautifulness that they bring to this project. So yeah, it's a little bit about them. So I'll let Joey kind of speak to the beginning of this work, because she really is the one who started and had the vision for the beginning of this youth collective.
Awesome, Miigwech. So this started back in 2018, I believe, or 2017. Nope, 2018. And I applied for a SHIRT grant, which is through, there's 3 main tri-council funding agencies at the university level. So I applied for a grant and wasn't successful the first time, but the second time they had given me my university, anyway, they gave me a little bit of money to hire a research assistant. So me and Michelle Kennedy worked together, and we wrote a grant, and we called it Youth Voices. And we decided that we wanted to include youth from the four areas in Ontario. So we included youth from Sudbury, we included youth from Ottawa, also from London, and then also from, help me out here, Alicia. London, Sudbury, Ottawa, and I believe it was in northwestern Quebec. I believe we skipped the border. We crossed the border, even though we weren't supposed to. That was it. But you know, as Anishinaabe, or for myself as Algonquin Anishinaabe Kwe, I think I'm borderless. I don't want to define myself by borders. So we went and we worked with them. So anywho, yeah, so we received a grant for them to go and see each place every few months, and we talked to them about reconciliation. And in the beginning, it was about truth and reconciliation. So we asked, using photo voice and using words, all of those different things, we asked them questions about reconciliation. So each youth had different things to say about reconciliation and what it means to them. Some said, you know, I'm really looking at reconciliation as a means of education for other people. And some of the youth said, I don't believe in reconciliation at all. So we had a diverse perspectives of what that is, and how to work with, you know, the larger public for them to be able to know what youth are saying about reconciliation. So that funding ran out. But I was able to secure more funding internally to hire a coordinator. And if you see at the bottom of the picture, the gentleman in the picture, he came along and he worked with me for a year. Alicia, what's his name again? I see him all the time.
This is before me, but
yes, Pascal, that's his name. Pascal Sear, yes. And he actually graduated from our program, the Indigenous Social Work program now, and he's the father of a little girl, and he's married, he's doing very well, working in social services. So, and then also in the picture, you'll see Michelle Kennedy with the black hat on, and then we had a placement student working with us, and then Beverly also, who was a placement student. So really thinking about what this project is, and always trying to find ways to get money to hire youth to continue the work, I think was one of the most important things. And that's where the project began back in 2018. And all of the youth that were involved in the initial project, we're currently writing a chapter together, a chapter on youth voices and how it was created, and how we switch from reconciliation to reclamation. I think it's in its second edits now, I believe. It's been accepted and revised twice. So we're just waiting to hear back from the publisher on that one. So yeah. So I think it's really important to be able to get that knowledge out also.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So like Joey said, our focus changed. So now our collective, our group, we identify our group as Youth Voices. And so we're a little blurb about us, I guess, is that we're an Indigenous youth-led grassroots group. So the group, as Joey said, it actually began in 2018 to discuss youth perspectives on truth and reconciliation. But now our focus has shifted to reclamation of identity through culture, land, and language. And that youth that are involved are from all across Ontario, from different communities and nations. So I'm just going to introduce some of our project before I go into a description of what our work is. So as I mentioned, in the Indigenous Social Work program at Laurentian, and Joey was involved in some of this, or in bringing this work up and supporting youth in that community, and involving Michelle. And I was involved with Joey through my placement as well. So I was working with her on different work, and as all good mentors do, she kind of took us under her wing and said, "Hey, there's some grants. You and Eugenie are involved and interested in this work and community, and let's put something together and work." Hang out and we can make it what we want to do. And so that's kind of where that started from, was Joey kind of planting that seed in us to bring together ideas and putting us into a leadership position, but also being there to support us and show us how to write a grant application and show us that these opportunities are available through different funding sources. So we applied through a grant through Laidlaw, which they have an Indigenous Community Futures Fund that they believe still. And so we applied and submitted our project ideas, and we came together and we decided that we had already been working and gathering in community just organically already around the seasons. And so that's how we decided to organize our project, was to look at each season and try to learn something that's important to us from the folks that are already in our lives and in our communities. So I'll just read out what I put here. So colonialism disrupts our story sharing traditions and practices, and sharing these knowledges is important to and live. So this project seeks to work with Anishinaabe communities for youth to learn about culture, land, and language. And we are in the process of hosting 4 seasonal community gatherings or workshops to learn land-based skills and gather stories from the bush. So we had invited community members to author chapters discussing their relationships with the land. And then as youth, we are facilitating that process in gathering with them and then working with them to go through the publishing and editing processes for the collection, and then also including our own stories. And I'm just gonna move to the next slide to discuss kind of where the main seed for this specific project came from. Sorry, go ahead, Joey.
Just before we continue, I just wanted to bring up, there was a question about why did some of the youth not believe in reconciliation? And that was one of the questions. And what had happened during that time was when there were the raids in Wet'suwet'en, and how the youth strongly reacted to the RCMP going in and dismantling their traditional lands and territories and what they were protecting. So from there, we switched from Reconciliation Nation to Youth Voices. And I think what happens sometimes, right, is like reconciliation sounds wonderful and it sounds amazing. And it's like, yeah, I want to do that reconciliation work. But then we see all of these things happening in the world that do not fall into place with reconciliation. Right. So we think about how long Cindy Blackstock, I'm going off topic here, how long Cindy Blackstock had to fight, right, to have equal funding for children on reserve. You know, we had to wait for Jordan River Anderson to, you know, move on to the spirit world and go, you know, and only after that was Jordan's principle involved or created. So there's lots of different things that we see that make a difference than what people will say. People can say everything that they want and they can sound wonderful and amazing. But when it comes down to it, we're going to watch what you do and we're going to observe you. And I noticed youth do that very well. So they can call you out on your bull SHIT in a minute. And I think that's why I like hanging around with them, you know, and working with them, because it's true, authentic work, right? Anywho. Just wanted to share that. That's why some of the youth did not want to be called or go in the perspective and follow the road to reconciliation. They thought, hey, what about me? I think I need to reclaim who I am first before I can actually figure out a way to create relationships with other non-Indigenous people. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Joey. I was going to say too, exactly what you said at the end there, but for me, I think it is about shifting that focus away from our relationships with non-Indigenous people and focusing on building up our youth and building up our own communities and still repairing a lot of the harm and the loss that has happened. And I think this project, in a way, is in direct response to those harms without having to make it narrative. We know that colonialism has been very violent in attempting to disconnect communities from our land and from our ways of being and from our culture. And how we go about and rebuild for ourselves doesn't need to be centered on those stories of harm, because we know those stories. We live those stories. We have them in our families. We see them every day. And that's hard work to live in that. And so we need to, I think for me, one of the main things in my life is building spaces for us to come together and just share space with one another in a good way. For us to feel joy is in direct resistance to those harms. And yeah, so thanks for bringing that point forward, Joey. I think that context is really important to where we find ourselves. And I think sometimes that history of like how this work came to us isn't always like in the forefront of our minds, because we're just doing what we organically love to do together. And it doesn't always feel like we're doing something that's like a direct resistance or politically charged, but in many ways, because we're for our lands, we're connecting to who we are as Anishinaabe people, and that's very powerful. So it's also powerful how the kind of spark for this project came about. So Eugenia, Joey, Lynn, Michelle, and another person that was, I believe, a placement student with Joey, they were working together on a resource book called Story Sharing with Grassroots Groups. It was a separate project that Joey was facilitating with some placement students, and they were visiting Anishinaabe, Inéwin, and Kokomug, and which is a community in Quebec, and that's I have some information about their beginnings. So that's kind of facilitated by Shannon Chief. She's a member of Barrier Lake First Nation. She has connections into Temiskaming First Nation and Long Point First Nation as well. And she's the founder of Anishinaabe, Odanewan, and Kokomug Advisory Circle in Algonquin Territory. And she's been very involved in her communities and has expanded this work into protecting the moose in their territories. But so Joey was in relationship with Shannon and was bringing students to work together on the story sharing manual. And through visiting with the Kokums, they expressed that they wanted the group to come back because they still had short stories they wanted to share and to record and to write down in a record. And so Joey and Eugenia came back, and Michelle, and we were thinking about this project, and we were thinking they were feeling, that responsibility that was asked of them to go back and to fulfill what the Kokums have asked. So that's kind of where collecting these stories and sitting with community came from, where that initial idea came from. And also our own individual passions for wanting to rebuild that relationship with who we are as Anishinaabe youth and our communities, and wanting to be on the land for myself, especially at this time. I think Eugenia and I were both living in Sudbury, which is away from our home communities, and trying to build those roots for ourselves to be lifted up in community and to feel supported and to feel like we have a home space in that territory. So that's kind of where our work came from, and that was a while ago. So we've been working on this project. I think we got the grant in 2022 last year in the spring. And so we did go back and visit with Anishinaabe, Odanewan, and Kokomug. So we visited and we feasted. And I think it was interesting, this visiting time, because even though initially that seed had been planted with us, they're very sure to share with us the responsibility to carry these stories in a good way, and to recognize that not everything can be written down and shared openly. And so we're really in relationship in that way, to recognize that these stories aren't our stories, and really embodying that ethic, that respect of, we're coming into their community as guests, and we're working with them, and that's theirs to decide what happens with it. So it was really a wonderful time. Joey and I were able to go and visit, and this was the first time I was able to meet this group of women. They're so wonderful and beautiful people. They live out in the bush still. They cooked us a beautiful meal. I remember when we went, we had brought Mahnomen from our territory, and the little kids that were gathering with us thought it looked like bugs, which was really funny. So spending time and learning from each other, they wanted to hear stories of, from our communities, and they shared stories from theirs. And it was just a really wonderful time and space to spend together and just to visit. Visiting is important, and sharing our stories are important. And that couple days, and it filled my cup. It was important for my spirit. Joey, did you want to say anything about this part of our project?
Yeah, I think you covered it really well. And I think part of it too is not going with the notion that we're going to collect information and leave. We spent a lot of time with them. I still spend a lot of time with Shannon, going back and forth all the way up north. It's pretty far in the park that they live. So from where I am, it's about 7 hours. But it's important to remain connected to, for me, it's like maybe not going home, because that's not my home territory, but it's going to a place that I feel familiar with, and people are now familiar with me. So I think that continued relationship is important, and honoring their words and the stories that they share with us. Miigwech.
Exactly. Miigwech, Joey. So that was in the summer in Inéwin, and then in the fall in Degwagi, we were really grateful to work with our dear friend and relative Julia Pegabo. She's lives in Atikmikshing, and which is in Nissmukmuk territory, so just outside of Sudbury. And her and her family have been working in relationship with Mahnomen to reseed some of the lakes in their territory, and they've been carrying that responsibility for a number of years. And we were interested in learning about Mahnomen. I remember having a discussion with Michelle, I think a year before we put in for our grant application, and really admiring that responsibility that her family had taken on, and wanting to be involved in that work, and hoping that we could support that work and be helpers to that process. So we approached Julia and asked her if she would be interested in working with us, or working together to support her work and her family. And she was excited to agree. And so last year in the fall, we were able to plant green seed through our project, and pay for that green seed, so that her family doesn't have to take on that burden. And we went out as a group, and we did, Julia led us in offering ceremonial offerings for the Mahnomen spirit. And we've been grateful to also be working on learning a song from Elder Dorothy Taylor from Kirk Lake First Nation. So not only are we we're working on nurturing these traditional foods in our communities, but we're also focusing on, the ceremony that's involved in that process, and how we go about that and engage people, and do that in a respectful way for the territory as well. And I'm really excited to continue in relationship with this work. This year we weren't able to reseed, just with some of our life circumstances, but we were able to gather at the Mahnomen Kewin gathering just last weekend. And I think I have a slide about that. from the year we went last year. Yeah, so we were able to also through project funds, we were able to bring a group of families and youth and community down to Curve Lake last year in the fall, and to learn more about the process of Mahnomen and how you reseed that and how you can nurture that in your community and in your waterways. And it's a really wonderful gathering. It starts out in a sunrise ceremony as well, and it just really lights that fire about, you know, the work that you might feel like you're doing in an isolated way. There was only, you know, a small group of us out reseeding in our community. But to see that there is like a collective of people working together and that this is important work. You know, you might be just a couple of you in your community, but it's important. So it was really wonderful to be able to gather in that way. And I'm really grateful for the families in Curve Lake that are doing that work and really supporting the revitalization of Mahnomen and other communities as well. And I think, you know, food is another way that we nurture our well-being, not only like our bodies, but also spiritually, and how we feel good and how we have, you know, we can have good minds as well. And yeah, so I just think this work is so important to, you know, our sovereignty as communities to be able to feel good and live good lives, and also recognizing that this work often takes a lot of time. So I mentioned that Julia's family has been reseeding for a number of years. I want to say at least 5 years, and we still we haven't seen a healthy rice bed develop yet in that region. And that's okay, because, you know, we love doing this work, even if it's not as, you know, prosperous as we would have liked it to be. We're still, the seed that we replant is still feeding some ducks in the region, some beavers, and we love our communities, and we love like the generations that are coming as well. You know, we hope that through this work, you know, that one day maybe our children or grandchildren can know Mahnomen as a regular food source in their diets and feel that love that we're planting today. So it's really a holistic like experience to be involved in that work, to be out in the canoes and engaging physically in that way, and physically being on the water and feeling the Mahnomen and seeing it spiral down. It's a beautiful, beautiful ceremony to be involved in that work. Slide. Sorry if it's a little bit slow. So then with our project, this wasn't a part of our initial grant proposal, but I think it's important to note that like when you're working with youth, things and any project, things don't always follow a linear path, in that other things come up and other things become important. And I really admire that Joey is able to really take a lead from the youth. We were all really involved in round dance and interested in round dance, and the Assembly of Seven Generations is another youth group that was putting on a round dance in Algonquin territory in Ottawa. And we wanted to go, and so Joey was able to gather or pull together some funds from our project, also from Youth Rex, also from a grassroots group called Niche Community Auctions in our community. And we were able to make that happen. And we took a van of community members to that region. We were also really grateful to have our language teacher, Mary Lou Mantwabi, alongside with us to share some round dance terms with us. And just coming together as community and creating spaces for youth it's really important. I think a lot about some conversations that are happening in my life as a young person and in my community about sobriety and youth wanting to prioritize sobriety. And I think if we want youth to be on that path and walking in a good way, we need to create more spaces where they can like have things to do with each other that aren't focused on drugs and alcohol. And for myself, like that's been really important to keep busy in ways that like fill my cup up and make me feel like I'm a part of community and I'm having fun on a weekend, and it doesn't have to involve going to a bar, which it's okay if that is your reality, if that's something that you participate in, but creating these other spaces where youth have time and are lifted up in ways to participate in those other activities is really important, I feel. Joey, did you want to say anything else about that?
Just that I agree with you, like creating those spaces are important. And if we want youth to be informed and not have to relive what maybe I have lived as a youth, then we have to create those opportunities and spaces, and not in a way that, oh, I created this and I did this. It's more like, okay, what do you need? That sounds fun. Let's do it. And we'll always figure out a way to do it. So reaching out to like youth recs, right? Like knowing that I'm part of that organization too. And they're like, yeah, sure, we can do this, this, and this. And then niche community auctions, having an auction so we can raise some money for gas, to pay for a rental. And then Youth Voices having money. And then also my health center. So Wolf Lake First Nations Health Center, they also paid for hotel and food. So putting that all together, I think it shows youth that I think that they can do what they need to do, and that it can be done in a collective way, and it can be fun. And I think that's part of it. And working with Alicia and Eugenia and Michelle on this project, specifically the Stories from the Bush, has been fun, right? Because we know each other, we're friends. And also when some of us are not feeling well, what happens is that the other one will take over. So I wasn't feeling well to go to the ricing festival or the Mahnomen festival. So Michelle said, yeah, okay, I'm going to go, so we just go with the flow. It's very like fluid. And I think part of that is the quote that I like, that I've used for years, is flowing will get you places, forcing never could. And if we can live our life like that, for the most part, I'm not saying I'm perfect. Good Lord, I'm not perfect. But if we can start to live our life that way, things seem to just get easier. I think, yeah. So, miigwech.
Yeah. You'll kind of see, and as I continue with the project, we've taken a little bit of a break in part of our plans with how we outlined our grant. So there's we didn't really participate formally in rolling out or coordinating events this spring and summer. There was just a lot of change happening for myself and Eugenia and Michelle as well. Michelle and I both moved to different cities, and we're still staying connected and figuring out how we can coordinate together and come together in different circumstances. And it's okay to take a pause on things, especially because a lot of this work is volunteer. We all have other jobs, and I'm in school, and things get busy, and that's okay when things don't go along with the exact timeline that we had set out. And I appreciate when granting agencies can recognize that and be in relationship and communication with their youth groups, because volunteer work it can be challenging to fit into, when things get busy. We all have families, and yeah, and I appreciate that we all kind of have that attitude in our group, is like we just kind of go with the flow. Even today, Joey had coordinated me to be involved in this webinar, and I was like, oh, I don't know, that's a lot of people, but you know what, if this opportunity is here, and Joey is kind of encouraging me and sees things in me that I might not always see in myself, I just go with the flow with her ideas a lot of the time, and I learn a lot from that, and I really value that relationship to push me out of my comfort zone sometimes. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So yeah, so as I was saying, we're still, we kind of pushed back our timeline. So we're going to be trying to coordinate with and Nipissing First Nation to gather in the winter and talk about snowshoes and track identification. And that's another thing with how we organized this grant, was we had people in our lives and in our communities that we want to learn from, but we left it kind of open-ended to the things that they carry and skills that they have that they want to share with us. So with Mahnomen, with Julia, we were kind of all interested in that, but it was a conversation. It wasn't, hey, you're doing Mahnomen, like we only want to learn about that from you right now. It was, hey, we're interested in that. Would you be interested in sharing that with us, or being a part of this grant? How does that look like in your life? How does that fit into, your schedule? Would you be interested in working with us and sharing with us? And then in the spring, we're planning bush survival skills with my cousin, Louis Francis. And again, it was a similar conversation where I was like, hey, Louis, you know all this stuff. What do you want to share with us? And we're going to come together and hang out and spend some time together. So we're planning those currently. And then as part of our main project, gathering stories, we're going to go through the process of reviewing and finalizing after that. And like Joey had mentioned, coming back to community and recognizing that they are their stories and not our stories, and working in collaboration for that publishing process, which again, like things flow. It's kind of been on the sideline a little bit, but those things will come. And I think we've made a commitment to this project, and I feel that responsibility myself. And just because we put things down doesn't mean we're not committed to them. So I do want to make that a priority to honor those stories and continue this project as we set out. And yeah, so, and then we hope at the end to do some community feasting. That wasn't really in our budget for this grant, but we're going to do some grassroots organizing and plan to fundraise for that, because that is most exciting part, is when we come together, we eat and we laugh and we share. Okay, so I just I kind of wanted to wrap it up thinking about the theme of this webinar and talk about some of the main important things that kind of came up in my personal learning with this work. So I think we already kind of touched on it, but I think creating these spaces and coming together have really been spaces of safety for myself, spaces of community, and really feeling like love and feeling that belonging and acceptance. I'm grateful for the kind of mentors and teachers and people in my life that are gentle and kind and lift us up and nudge us along to do things that are out of our comfort zone, but never push us too far to do things that we're not ready to do. And I'm really grateful for that kind of mentorship in the space that adults and some of these older, elders keep for us as young people in the community. And I also wanted to note that it's not surprising to me that this space is mostly held by women and two-spirit relatives. Of course, there are men in our lives and folks that support this work, but they're not always the ones holding it up. And I don't think that's like a coincidence. Women are always in my life and in my communities. I see women doing this work and supporting their youth, supporting their families, coming together, gathering and supporting one another. I think that's a really big theme, is the relationships between the women in our community and how we gather and bring one another together. And then these relationships expand beyond this grant. We're all friends. We support each other when things happen. And I think that's the power of this work, is that, we build it, create space for us to build relationships that last beyond this project. Like, I want to be involved in reseeding Mahnomen for years to come. Like, we're already thinking about next year, and I want to be involved and make that a priority. And I just feel so lifted and feel so loved. And often that, people talk about how that's often missing sometimes in urban spaces for Indigenous folks. And I think this has been a really wonderful way that we've been able to build community, where we're all coming from different nations, we're coming from different places, and still finding that safe space in the middle. And then I also wanted to talk about or just touch on how this work is holistic. It's not only like writing and thinking about publishing or thinking about writing grants, even though that's a part of it. We're also engaging our bodies. We're out on the land, we're paddling, we're out on the waters. And then we're also engaging our spirits and our heart. So we're also really, I'm so grateful to be able to be alongside some of our teachers and engage in ceremony together. And I think that's another part of that community of safety and lifting youth up to be who they are as Anishinaabe people. I think that kind of touches on the points that I was wanting to talk about. Joey, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think that everything you said is like spot on, you know, and it's those relations that we have with one another and also with the land is so important. And not only, you know, like the trees and the water and all those amazing things that are our relatives, but also the land and the sky and, you know, all that's in between and the universe, all of those different things those are things that some of us can be disconnected from right now, which is why we're in this state of reclamation, to gain that back. Not that we've lost it, but that we need to pick it back up, like you had said earlier. And I think that that's an imperative in our work, and also when we're thinking about BAW and their work also. I think we're going to get to that on the next slide. So I just gave you a good segue.
Awesome. So for our next slide, and we're like kind of perfectly on time here, I think, because we're getting close to 2 o'clock, but we wanted to take some time to think about and into your practice. So we know from our work that the land is healing. It's our relative. It's important to who we are as Anishinaabe people. And yeah, I want it to be a time for us to come into some like curious consideration. There's no right or wrong answers, but just giving you some space to contemplate maybe some of the things we've discussed and how that applies to your practice. And then we'll just go into a summary and move into some of the questions after that. So I'll just do a quick 5 minutes of quiet. Okay, so we're just about at 5 minutes, and miigwech everyone for taking that time and maybe looking at your own lives and your own work and to consider that question. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answers, and I hope some of your consideration will move beyond this space as well. And so I'm just going to pass it over to Joey. Maybe if you want to share any final thoughts. I just outlined our learning objectives for today, and then we can move into wrapping it up and then moving into the Q&A.
Yeah, sure. So the learning objectives for the webinar. So we sent these in and thought these are things that you may learn from our presentation. So understanding how youth are working in their communities on cultural reclamation with the older generation, so the elders, the traditional knowledge keepers, and then discussing the importance of this type of knowledge transfer. So that knowledge transfer being the stories, being the work that's being done on the land, with the land, repairing, healing the land as we move together, and then discussing why cultural identity in youth is important and that youth can speak from a place of understanding. So we know, well, we understand that youth need to have identity. They need to know who they are, so they have that firm place to operate from at a time when things are a little bit up in the air. You know, there's a lot going on in youth's lives at that time. There's a lot of change, you know, holistically, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So being able for them to know who they are is so important, so we can move away from responding to trauma and move into celebrating life, right? So changing the dialogue from, for example, suicide, and changing it to life promotion, right? So I think that's important also. And then start planning on how to bring land into your practice as part of healing from intergenerational trauma and also current trauma. So just having that starting plan, which, you know, 5 minutes is not a lot, but, you know, just getting those gears going from, you know, probably maybe for yourself years of practice already. Maybe you're starting out, maybe you're going to go back and tell, you know, people that you're working with, you know, someone, you know, Alicia and Joey talked, well, mostly Alicia talked a lot about youth and the work that they're doing on the land, you know, and how they can connect it to healing. What are your thoughts on that type of idea? So I think it's a good place to start, and that it's always going to be a journey. And we're never going to get to the end and say like, oh, we have finally cured trauma. We're done. We know that's not how it works. So just understanding that it's a journey and to be kind to those involved, including ourselves. So, yeah.
Awesome. So miigwech everyone. I want to, of course, mention our main funder, Laidlaw Foundation. So we were a successful recipient of the Indigenous Youth and Community Futures Fund in 2022. And we look forward to continuing this work. I also want to say a big miigwech to the communities that support us as youth, to the women and two-spirit relatives that create spaces of community, acceptance, and love. I also want to thank the Learning Network and Knowledge Hub for holding this space for us today, of course, and also for everyone who was able to ask miigwech for your presence, participation, and your consideration. And I hope that you all walk away today with a seed that will support your work, that you may be able to nurture and grow with continued contemplation, conversation. And of course, we'll enter into some more discussion in the Q&A. And I think someone is facilitating that on the hub's end, I believe.
Yes, thank you so very much. We do. I think people have really enjoyed this presentation, and there are a number of questions that we would like to pose for you. So this first question that I'd like to ask, it's really for Alicia. And one of the things you talked about is finding ways to fill your cup up and create spaces for youth to connect. And our audience wondered, what opportunities do you feel have been most effective for drawing youth in and in feeling fulfilled? What are there things that really stand out to you in terms of that process or those activities?
That's a great question. I think for me, my participation in a lot of programming and things often begins with like relationships that just happen organically in community. I think there's a lot of like nervousness when, I've attended other programming where I don't really know anyone yet, and not really knowing if like, not feeling like comfortable or like welcome yet in a space just because the space is new to me. So I think like a lot of the ways that we've developed this work is just through like friendship and relationships that I have. Like I met Joey through school, and I think that even though there's institutions are challenging spaces like Indigenous centers at universities and colleges are really, I feel, are hubs for youth and Indigenous people coming through those spaces to get connected to one another in spaces or communities that are often like away from their homes. So that's how I was able to build relationship with Joey, with Eugenia, with Michelle. And I think Joey is really great at doing this because she is in community in a lot of ways outside of Laurentian. So she'll do programming at the Friendship Center. She'll go to community events. She wants to know who's in the community. And I don't mean to speak on her behalf, but just she is a welcoming and inviting person that is looking to build relationships with youth. And that makes me feel welcome and safe to be in spaces where, we're just organically together, and then we become friends, and then, or I go to round dances and I see people that I'm kind of familiar with, and then we get chatting, and now I'm being invited to their different beading workshop, and I'm building a relationship organically that way. I think is a lot of the ways that youth kind of walk in this world. I think sometimes we're a little bit nervous of putting ourselves in new spaces where we don't really know who's going to be there. And so those informal relationships, I think, are pathways to like entering into some of those doorways where we might feel a little bit of resistance initially just within ourselves. I hope that kind of answers the question. But yeah, I guess that would be my answer for now.
Thank you, Alisa, and thank you, Joey, for sharing the project. We have another question. One challenge in urban settings is getting youth into nature. Do you have any insight into creating interest in youth to pull them away from technology and etc.?
The first thing that comes to my mind is like food. As a young person, having good food around is something that usually encourages me to go places. So my experience too, like I spent a lot of time at Indigenous Center at Laurentian, and if there was an event happening where there was lunch, because I was like a student, I would be there for lunch, and I would be more inclined to go and participate. I think another thing about urban spaces is like access and transportation, I think about too. So often when we're in cities, we might have to travel a distance, away from where a lot of people live, and buses might not always go there. I know in Sudbury, our transit system is notoriously ineffective and slow. So a lot of programming often happens in spaces that we have access to, like at the university, there's a lot of green space, or we carpool, or I know Joey has organized things where you do like ride sharing. You have people go and pick other people up so that they can access spaces that might not be available by public transit. I really look to some of the programming like that the Friendship Center is doing in our community. They have in Sudbury, they have access to a land space outside of the city, and so they really work on making that accessible for youth to get out on the land And I think specifically like youth programming too, like when it's a space, when you're a youth entering into a space with a lot of other youth, you kind of feel that safety of like, okay, I'm not the only young person here. I'm not the only person like putting myself out there and feeling uncertain. There's other people who feel nervous. It's just a little bit more approachable for me specifically. But yeah, technology, it's a challenge. I think a good way to reach youth is to advertise the work you're doing online. And I'm sure a lot of you are involved in that. I think asking youth, like, what are they interested in? What do they want to see? A lot of success in our community happens when youth are sharing their gifts and their skills with other youth. So having a youth facilitate a workshop and in something that they're skilled at, say it's beading, say it's, I don't know, trapping, what are they interested in and who are their friends? Because they're going to pull their friends in and say, hey, come support my workshop. I'm nervous. And then those are new people that are accessing your programming as well. So yeah, Joey, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, those were all great. And those are all things that I would do also. And also thinking about like, just that saying there, if you can't beat them, join them. So if technology is in the way, use technology to connect, right? So, create a TikTok challenge, use Snapchat, get on Instagram, all of those different things. It's really important for us to know that, well, for me to know that online is just as real to some youth than it is in person, right? So to us, sometimes myself, I'm like, that's not real life, but to them, it really is. So get on that platform, and connect with them somehow. Also too, I think remembering too, that not all youth want to go to programming, right? Maybe they have to go home and take care of their siblings while their mom goes to work until their dad gets back. From maybe a 12-hour shift or something. And some other people, especially in the throes of intergenerational trauma, the coping skills that are happening at that time with their parents or their caregivers leave the child to, this is not their first thing. Their first thing that they're thinking of is, what am I going to eat and where am I going to sleep tonight? It's not, am I going to go to this training or this youth group for 2 hours? Then what am I going to do? I'd rather spend those 2 hours really thinking about, where I'm going to sleep tonight. And I think another thing that I've done in the past, I'm sorry to keep it long, but is youth engagement, right? Just this idea. So back in 2008, I believe it was, a group of us, it was a Aboriginal women's healing circle, we called it. And we just hung out, ate food, and came up with ideas. We came up with a peer mentorship program where we trained 10 youth to go out into the schools and talk to other youth. And then those youth wanted to get involved. So it won't be my face that's going to get people involved all the time, but it'll probably be more Alicia and Eugenia's face, right? So there's that. Miigwech.
Thank you.
Well, and Joy, I'm wondering, I've been listening to everything that you have just said and recognizing timing and space and the importance of sort of, those outreaches that happen kind of naturally in the context of relationships. Some of our audience members were really thinking about, I think, youth who are dealing with some of the impacts of intergenerational trauma and who may be involved in systems or that are not particularly healthy, and who may be struggling. And I'm just wondering about, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of your thinking around that balance of both, maybe program isn't, this isn't right for everyone, but the outreach part of that to try to reach people who maybe really need to be reconnected in their lives.
So just if I understand the question correctly, you're asking about the balance that may be occurring?
Yeah, about the balance when you're recruiting and the balance of trying to do outreach and also kind of thinking about where people are at and how you navigate some of those, more so those spaces or those places where, there might be youth maybe struggling a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think sometimes it can feel, I don't know if you can hear that knocking. I'm so sorry. There's people working on my house right now, and they've chosen this time to go to that wall and work. So apologize. I think sometimes it can feel like an octopus for myself. Like I'm doing this one thing with one group, and then another group has something else going on, and then so and so doesn't show up because of something, so then it's not only being there for the people that show up, but also being there for the people I think that don't show up, following up with them, making sure that they're well, that they're okay. Yeah, there's it's been a while since I've done frontline work with youth because I work at the university. But I think those are some of the things, is that being non-judgmental, being open, going to where they are, offering what you can, and knowing that you are probably not going to change their life and change their world. And that's a hard thing for us as helpers to understand, but we can be part of their helping bundle, right? We're not going to be the be all end all, but we can be a small part of what is needed for them to make those changes, or to get through the system, to age out, right? To, and try to keep them, try to give them some tools to keep them out of the institutions, because some will get comfortable with institutional life and that's all they know. So they continue on. And that's quite common too, is that life of institution. So yeah, I think that we, through, again, but through role modeling and through being there, being non-judgmental and being there as they need us, I think is one of those things that will be helpful.
Thank you. We have a last question from our audience. What would you recommend for individuals who have been separated from their home communities and culture to do this important work?
That's a good question. I think I kind of touched on some of this a little bit already, because like just speaking to my own experience, I moved away from home. I wasn't too far from home. I was still in like Anishinaabe territory, but I wasn't with my community and people that I had built up as supports at home. And it was just being at those hubs, I think, is where I kind of found people that aligned with me and aligned with what I was searching for as a young person. I think most cities have either a friendship center, an Indigenous friendship center, or a lot of cities have Aboriginal health access centers in urban spaces. And those can be places where Indigenous community comes together, we gather, there's different events going on. And just if you're looking to reconnect, going and learning and being open, and that's how those organic relationships happen too, is just going to a gathering, saying hello to the person that's next to you and learning about, where's your community, where do you come from? And then, oftentimes that's how we greet each other. And when we're meeting each other, we kind of share who we are and where we come from and a little bit of our story to give context to who we are and what we're doing in that space. And, and I think being honest about, where you are in your journey. If you don't know what your community is and you don't know your clan or your name, that's okay. I don't know my clan. It took me a while to get my name and to build relationships with elders that I trust and people in my community that I trust and feel supported by. And I think online too, there's a lot of spaces to connect and a lot of different like online webinars and things where people are sharing about their stories and just being that open learner. And I think often like things happen as they need to, and we meet the right people at the right times, and just trusting in creation and trusting in those processes as they come to you.
Thank you, Alisa. Joey, do you want to add anything?
Sure. I think just the idea of the earth, right? So Mother Earth, or Shkakmakwe, or however you want to refer to her, is all connected and interrelated, right? So the bodies of water, and the rivers that run through, it's all connected. So no matter where they are on the earth, they can be connected to land. It's all, all our relations, we're all interconnected and interrelated. And what happens sometimes is the communities that we come from, maybe the land is sick, right? Maybe there's a tailings pond or mining has taken place near there. So how do we get well when our original communities are not well, right? It's just that idea that we are all connected and that it doesn't take a lot for us to walk outside, even open a window, right? Open a window and smell the air. That's an element, right? You think about the 4 elements: earth, air, wind, fire, and water. I believe I got them all. And all those things together, and what we can use to help us heal, right? Water by cleansing ourselves. And if we can't get outside, turn on the tap. If you can't turn on the tap because where you're from, the water, you don't have running water, or the water's not good. Think about when it rains, collecting rainwater, right? So there's lots of different ways that we can maneuver around the systems that have been built, and that are designed to oppress and assimilate us. But because I don't want to say resilient, because I've heard that word so many times, but that we are strong and smart enough and know that we can survive, and that we're able to maneuver around those formal helping institutions and go to our own informal and natural helping systems, or institutions, if you want to call them that. I feel so much better when I'm in the bush, right? I'm in the bush, my feet are on the earth. My gait is unsteady because I don't know the land that well yet. You're smelling different things, you're seeing different things. Wi-Fi doesn't work out there all the time, right? So you're disconnected from that part of the world, and you're with the people you are in that moment together with them, and the animals and the trees and the plants, all of those different things. There are so many helpers around us that can continue helping us live that good life. And if you're not living a good life, or feel like you're not living a good life, there are lots of medicines and lots of different things out there that can help. Yeah, I could go on and on, but I'm gonna stop now.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thanks, Alicia, and thank you, Joey, for sharing your experience, working knowledge. I'll pass it now to Katrina.
Yeah, and I just also want to express appreciation for both of you. And I think that the message you were just giving, Joy, was, and that you have given as well, Alicia, both just really powerful messages. And I really have been thinking, as you were just talking about, your challenge to us, which is to kind of take 5 minutes and think about how you can connect better with the land, and all of the examples that you just gave, and all of the examples that you gave all the way through about how important and relevant that is. So I just want to really thank you very much, Joey and Alicia, for presenting today. I would also like to thank the ESL interpreters, Emma and Vanessa, and the French language interpreters, Sylvie and Caroline. Don't forget to complete the evaluation form and to receive a certificate of participation. So when after this webinar has ended, that link is going to automatically appear in your browser. Have a great afternoon. Outside of my window, there is a lot of sun and some nice breeze and a lovely, lovely day. I hope that you have some time to experience a bit of it. We look forward to seeing all of you at the next webinar. Thank you.